Welcome to The Bitter Witness.
Don't be scared.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Rebecca, and I'm your host for The Bitter Witness. I hope you've had a good week. I've had a great week. I'm directing a production at the community theater, and things are all starting to fall into place, so I'm loving every rehearsal. Seriously, pick up your phone or open a new tab on your laptop right now. Google your local community theater and buy a ticket. Go see a show. You won't regret it, I promise. Last week's case was heavy. So I thought we would do a little lighter one this week. Well, it's not really lighter in terms of the modus operandi in the killing, but it's not as long a case as last week. So I guess I should say it's a shorter case, not a lighter case. Well, let's get the business out of the way, shall we? If you like this episode or any episode, please head on over to the Patreon page and give the show some love. For less than that ticket I just told you to buy, you can help me to continue bringing you episodes each week. You can also support the show on Spotify, and don't forget to give the show a 5-star review over on Apple. Apparently, it helps the show in the algorithm, which apparently I missed the memo that explained how it worked. Like, follow, and share the show on whatever platform you're listening to. Stop by our Facebook or YouTube page and leave a comment or share a post with everyone you know, or don't know for that matter. Everyone is welcome here. Send a suggestion for a future episode or just drop a line and say hi at thebitterwitness@gmail.com. That's enough of the business. Let's get to this week's case. The dogs are sleeping behind me, so Puppy ASMR will be brought to you by both Miley and Piper this week. So grab a cup of tea, sit back, relax, while I tell you about the case of the Rattlesnake Murderer. As always, I want to give the victims in the case top billing, but as in many of our cases, we have several victims. So to all those affected by this case and to all their loved ones, I acknowledge you and send my love to you wherever you may be. Marriage is often envisioned as a profound merger, a sacred act where two individuals surrender their entire beings, their hopes, dreams, vulnerabilities, and deepest trust to form a single, unified life. This complete giving, a pledge of unwavering commitment, is widely regarded as the bedrock of marital intimacy and the very essence of the bond. Yet, a starkly different reality can shatter this ideal when such profound trust is met not with reciprocal love, but with a calculated and evil, greedy intent. In today's case, we delve into the life of a serial marrier and murderer who carelessly violated this most sacred of marital promises and the profound trust placed in him, all for the most basic and cynical of financial motives. Raymond Lisimba was born March 6, 1894, to Alabama sharecroppers Julius Lisimba and Mary Emma Parmentier. I think I said those right. I honestly had no clue of what a sharecropper was, but I went to the magic Google box, and apparently it was someone who, back in the day, worked crops that were owned by someone else, and as payment for their work done, the worker would receive a share or a portion of the crops they had worked on. So a tough life, I would think. When Raymond was 8 years old, his parents took him out of school and made him work the crops with his dad. Raymond worked the fields until he found out that he had been left $4,000 by an uncle. There were differing opinions on how old Raymond was when he received the inheritance. A few articles said that he was 10, and some said he was in his 20s. Neither here nor there, $4,000 in the 1890s would be about the equivalent of $153,000 today. A nice little nest egg for a young man to start his life. Raymond decided to do just that. He left the farm life behind and moved to Birmingham. There, he changed his name to Robert James, which is what we are going to call him from here on out. That or Shitsnake, one of the two. Once settled in Birmingham, Robert enrolled in Barber College. When Robert was 26 years old, he married a woman named Maud Duncan. I have always loved the name Maud. I have no idea why I love it. I love the way it sounds. I think if I had had a daughter, I might have named her Maud. Shortly after the wedding, Maud divorced Robert for his sadistic cruelty. According to one article that I read, Maud stated that Robert had sadistic sexual desires, and they were just too much for Maud. After Birmingham was a bust, Robert moved on to Kansas. There, he opened a barber shop and married another woman, Vera May Vermillion. I think I said that right. And that marriage seemed to be going well until one day an angry man carrying a shotgun came barging into Robert's barber shop, aimed the gun at Robert, and declared that Robert had gotten his daughter pregnant. Robert decided that perhaps it was time to move on from Kansas on account of all the angry fathers in the area. So he deserted Vera and left her there, but luckily she was able to receive a divorce from Robert based on his serial infidelity. I wonder how many children Robert left in Kansas. Once Robert had skedaddled out of Kansas, he wound up in Fargo in 1932. There, he opened another barber shop and married another woman named Winona Wallace. Before the ink had a chance to dry on the marriage license, Robert had bought a life insurance policy on Winona. The couple settled into married life, and 3 months after the nuptials, on September 21st, Robert took Winona to Pikes Peak in Colorado for their honeymoon. Pikes Peak is a mountain in Colorado, which boasts as having the highest point of the southern Front Range of the Rocky Mountains, sitting at 14,107 feet. In actuality, Mount Elbert is the highest point in the Rocky Mountain Range, and it can also be found in Colorado. It stands at 14,400 feet. So, Pikes Peak is in the running. On the mountain of Pikes Peak, there is a scenic drive that you can reserve and take. It's called Pikes Peak Highway. It's a 19-mile toll road that will take you to the summit and back again. It consists of breathtaking views and razor-sharp cliffs and over 100-foot drops off the side. And now I want to go there and see this Pikes Peak Highway, just as soon as the U.S. calms down a little bit. And that's all I'm going to say about that. The entire drive on the Pikes Peak Highway takes about 2 hours. According to Robert, he and Winona were enjoying the scenery of the Pikes Peak Highway when suddenly the steering knuckle on the car broke, and their car veered off the road and over the side and down one of those steep cliffs and embankments. Robert stated that he was able to jump out of the car as it went over the side, but sadly, Winona was trapped inside the car. Robert ran for help, and when he and the toll booth operator arrived on scene, they found Winona alive, barely, and laying half out and half in the car. She had a wound behind her ear that was actively bleeding and some other wounds on her head. But considering she had just plummeted down a 150-foot embankment and slammed to a stop against a giant boulder, she was in pretty good shape. When the car was pulled back up to the road, a bloody hammer was found in the back seat. But after some smooth talking by Robert, police chalked it up that Robert must have hammered his hand and bled on the hammer at some point. Right. I'm sure that's exactly what happened and had absolutely nothing to do with all of the bloody wounds they found on Winona's head. The patriarchy. Robert and Winona decided to stay in a tourist cabin close to Colorado Springs to allow Winona to recover from the car crash, so that Winona would be able to physically handle the trip back to Fargo. After about 2 weeks of convalescing in the cabin, Winona was starting to get back on her feet a little bit. And just after that happened, Robert walked into the police station and reported that his wife had mysteriously drowned in their bathtub. Robert's explanation to the patriarchal police was that Winona must have suffered a head injury worse than what they had initially thought in the car accident, and she must have been dizzy and fell into the tub, hit her head, and slipped unconscious under the water, where she sadly drowned. There are some reports that state that when the medical examiner conducted an autopsy on Winona, they found bullet fragments inside her brain, but nothing was ever done about that, naturally. It probably was just an accident that metal fragments from bullets managed to find their way inside Winona's brain. And so, because the determination of Winona's death was that of accidental drowning, probably caused from dizziness, most likely caused by a head injury suffered in the car accident, Robert was able to collect on the double indemnity clause of their insurance policy. And so he pocketed a cool $14,000, which in today's money would be about $270,000, a nice little chunk of change. Later at Robert's trial, the toll booth operator, who Robert had run to after the car accident, would testify that there was no mud on Robert at all, and when they arrived at the crash site, there were no footprints in the mud near the car or anywhere on the embankment. Eventually, law enforcement would come to the realization that Robert hit Winona with the hammer in her head, and when that didn't kill her, he shot her behind the ear and pushed the car off the cliff with Winona inside the car. Because Winona lived, Robert became pissed. So, while she was recovering in the cabin, Robert drowned her in the bathtub and finally collected the insurance money. After burying Winona and collecting the insurance payout, Robert went to New Orleans. There, he met and married Ruth Thomas, a beauty shop owner. According to Robert later in his testimony, he was in party mode in New Orleans and doesn't really remember the marriage. According to Ruth, immediately after the wedding, Robert informed her that she had to attend a doctor's appointment to have a physical performed for a life insurance policy he wanted to take out on her. Ruth refused to take the physical, stating to Robert that people who have insurance policies on them all die in strange ways. According to Ruth, her refusal of having the physical done and his inability to purchase an insurance policy on her was the reason that Robert had the marriage annulled. I'm not sure where Robert went after New Orleans, but wherever he settled, he wrote to his nephew Cornelius Wright and asked Cornelius to come for a visit. Cornelius was a sailor and was excited to see his uncle on his next leave. During his visit with Uncle Shitsnake Robert, Cornelius asked to borrow the car. Robert agreed and waved the young sailor off for a night of debauchery. Unbeknownst to Cornelius, his uncle had recently taken out a $5,000 life insurance policy on him. That evening, the car drove off the side of a large cliff with Cornelius at the wheel. Sadly, the plunge down the embankment and the resulting crash killed young Cornelius. According to reports, when the wrecked car was towed back to Robert, the tow truck driver informed the grieving uncle that there was something wrong with the steering wheel of the car, which is what most likely caused his nephew to lose control and plunge over the cliff to his death. After collecting the insurance payout on Cornelius, Robert made his way to Los Angeles, the city of angels, filled with devils. There, he opened a large barber shop with all the bells and whistles, using pretty much all of the money he had received from all the different life insurance policies he had collected on. Shortly after opening his new shop, a beautiful, tall, blonde woman, Mary Emma Bush, came in to apply for the position of manicurist. And shortly after being hired, Robert and Mary were married in July of 1935. According to reports, Mary had found herself in the family way, but there were no celebrations for the little life growing inside her. Mary wanted to have an abortion. But much like today in some areas of our world, abortion was a touchy subject, and it was quite difficult to find a doctor that would be willing to perform the procedure. But luckily, or rather unluckily for Mary, she was married to an absolute piece of dog shit. And Robert, of course, just happened to know a doctor willing to perform the back alley abortion for Mary, for a modest fee, of course. Robert told his wife to leave everything to him, and he would take care of it. "I'm thinking this is not the best idea, Mary." Robert went to a good friend of his named Charlie Hope. Charlie was an ex-sailor and a hot dog stand operator. Robert informed Charlie that he, in fact, had a $21,000 life insurance policy on Mary, and that if Charlie would help him kill Mary, Robert would give him half the payout. Charlie agreed, and Robert let Charlie in on the plan. The first step of the plan, Charlie was tasked with finding 2 rattlesnakes. Robert handed Charlie $100 and a few extra bucks for expenses and told Charlie to go see his friend who raised rattlesnakes. We need to just stop here for a second. One, I don't care how good or not good of a friend you are to me. There is no way in hell I am going to find 2 snakes for you, especially rattlesnakes. I have way better ways to get rid of someone if there is, let's say, a need. And 2, well, I really can't think of a number 2 because snakes. Ugh. A couple days after being tasked with retrieving the 2 rattlesnakes, good old Charlie shows up with both of them in a box, which he had affectionately named Lightning and Lethal. And I have now lowered my opinion of Charlie, which was pretty much already in the gutter, but those are the stupidest names I have ever heard. You have 2 snakes, and it's 1935. Hello? Bonnie and Clyde were just taken out in 1934 in a hail of bullets, and you missed the opportunity, Charlie, to name these 2 snakes Bonnie and Clyde. Charlie. I am so disappointed in you. Moving on. Because Mary had never actually met Charlie, Robert had Charlie pose as the doctor willing to perform the abortion. On the evening of August 4th, 1935, Robert walked Mary into the kitchen of their home. He had told her that the doctor would be arriving shortly. He placed a blindfold over Mary's eyes, telling her that she wasn't allowed to see the doctor's face because abortions were illegal and they couldn't take any chances that Mary might describe what the doctor's face looked like if, God forbid, something went wrong and Mary had to be taken to the hospital and police were called to come and question her. Mary agreed. Once the blindfold was in place, Robert took a rope and began to tie Mary to the kitchen table. When Mary balked a little and asked Shitsnake Robert what the hell he was doing, Robert informed her that she had to be restrained because the procedure would be painful, and if she moved during the abortion, the doctor could slip and cut something he wasn't supposed to, and that could cause Mary to bleed out and die. This evoked feelings of apprehension, perhaps, in Mary, and concern, even. But Mary was desperate not to have this baby, and she agreed with Robert's explanation. Once Robert had secured Mary to the table, he produced a Mickey of whiskey and forced her to drink all of it. Robert informed Mary that because this was an illegal abortion, the doctor wouldn't be able to get any medications to help ease the pain and discomfort of the procedure, so the whiskey was to help take the edge off the pain. Robert must have been one hell of a sweet-talking, manipulative piece of vomit con man. Poor Mary. She must have been terrified. Once Mary was blindfolded and soused and tied to a table, Robert opened the door to Charlie, standing outside the house with the 2 rattlesnakes inside a box. The 2 men placed the box of snakes on the floor by Mary's leg, and Robert very gently lifted Mary's leg and placed it inside the box with the snakes. The snakes immediately began biting at her foot and lower leg. The 2 men then fled the house, leaving Mary to suffer an agonizing death by rattlesnake bites. Fucking cowards. You couldn't stay and watch what you were doing to your own wife? As soon as Mary felt her foot being placed into the box, she must have known she was in trouble. But sadly, there was nothing she could do. Mary would have instantly felt sharp, intense pain with each bite. The pain can come either in throbbing waves or a constant searing burn from rattlesnakes. Her foot and leg would have immediately swelled up like a balloon and started to turn black, which would have only intensified the pain she was suffering. After her foot and leg had become swollen to the point of bursting, her foot and leg would have started becoming numb with those painful pins and needles. You know the ones, when you sit on your foot for too long and then you stretch out your leg and the pain from the pins and needles almost takes your breath away. Imagine all of those symptoms happening at the same time from the tip of your longest toe all the way up to your hip. Once the venom started surging through her blood, Mary would have gotten a metal taste in her mouth. As soon as the metal taste had filled her mouth, she would have found it difficult to breathe. Her head would have started spinning, and she probably thought she was going to vomit. Eventually, Mary would have started getting weaker and weaker, and as the venom coursed its way through her bloodstream, the tissues of her body would become damaged to the point of non-existence. The toxin would have destroyed her red blood cells and inhibited her blood to clot. Eventually, Mary would have died from internal bleeding. So I guess we can now cross off any place with rattlesnakes from the bucket list of places I want to go. At about 1:30 a.m., Robert and Charlie, our two shit snakes, returned to the house, and to their shock, Mary was still alive, although very close to death. Robert immediately untied her from the table and dragged her to the bathroom, where he filled the tub and held her head under water until she drowned. While Robert was finishing off Mary, Charlie collected his two snakes and removed them from the house. The two men dragged Mary's lifeless body out to the backyard where there was a fish pond. The two men placed Mary on her stomach with her head just below the water, and they both left the house. The next day, Mary's body was found by a neighbor, and police were called. The death was ruled as an accidental drowning caused by Mary most likely tripping and knocking herself unconscious and landing face down in the fish pond where she drowned. Now that is the official version out of one of the transcripts from Robert's appeals, but I found a few different versions of what happened from newspapers that were printed around this time that were discussing how Robert and Charlie were caught. The first stated that Robert had told Charlie to burn down the house after he had placed Mary in the fish pond, but Charlie was so disgusted with the fact that Robert had left Mary to die and then drown her, apparently Charlie thought that was overkill, that he left and headed to a bar, where he got absolutely sauced and blurted to the bartender that he and Robert had just killed Robert's wife with rattlesnakes. The bartender called the police, and both Robert and Charlie were apprehended. The second version I found stated that Charlie left the house with the snakes after Mary was bitten, and Robert waited a little while and got impatient when Mary wasn't dying quick enough from the rattlesnake bites, and he decided to drown her in the tub and placed her in the fish pond. Then he invited their neighbors, James and Viola Pemberton, over for a dinner party that night. When James and Viola arrived, no one could find Mary in the house. Robert told the Pembertons to look out in the garden while he checked the cellar, and of course they found Mary face down in the pond with a very swollen and black foot. Police were called, and they informed Robert what it looked like to their expert police law enforcement eyes was that Mary had been bitten by a rattlesnake and fallen into the fish pond unconscious and drowned. But when Robert went to collect the insurance payout for Mary, the insurance agent became suspicious when he discovered that this was in fact Robert's fifth wife and that his first wife had also died by drowning. The agent called the police, and under interrogation, Robert immediately confessed to killing Mary and ratted out Charlie. I think we're dealing with a little game of telephone here, where the truth has been obscured over the years, but I would imagine that the version from the court transcripts is probably the most likely, so that's probably how they were caught. I would imagine that a neighbor did in fact find Mary's body the next day, and because law enforcement always looks at the spouse first, picked up Robert, and under interrogation he confessed and ratted out Charlie. No matter which way it happened, the police charged both Robert and Charlie with the murder of Mary. Both were found guilty by a jury of their peers. Although I don't think either of these assholes could have friends. That's just my opinion. Charlie was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Robert, on the other hand, received a death penalty. In fact, he was sentenced to die by hanging. According to one of the newspaper articles I read, the fact that Robert used rattlesnakes to kill Mary angered the jury so much that they immediately went to death by hanging. That sucks. You never want to piss off your jury, Robert. Robert naturally appealed his sentence. Well, because in actuality he was a coward, but His sentence was upheld twice by superior courts and once by the Supreme Court. Sorry, Bobby boy, but apparently the country that you fought for in World War I wants you to die. I kind of do too. In 1937, California, which is where all of this took place, decided that hangings were passé, and the entire state elected to go with the gas chamber as its only form of execution. By the time Robert's appeals had run their course, it was 1942, so it was looking like Robert was going to die by gas chamber. But then Robert was informed that because his original conviction was prior to 1937, he would still be executed by hanging. On May 1st, 1942, Robert Shitsnake James slowly walked up the steps of the gallows of San Quentin Prison. The hangman placed the noose around Robert's neck, slowly walked over to the handle, and pulled. Unfortunately for Robert, the hangman had really only been pulling a lever for the gas chamber for the past 5 years and not making nooses, so he was a little rusty. When Robert fell from the platform, the noose didn't break his neck instantly, and instead, Robert was strung up by the neck for about 10 minutes until he finally died of asphyxiation. Seems like a little karma, doesn't it? Well, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Karma's a bitch, dude. And that, my friends, is the case of the Rattlesnake Murderer, Robert James. My thoughts. What an absolute piece of dog shit this guy was. I can't imagine using rattlesnakes to kill someone. Not just for the reason that I'm literally terrified of snakes, but that would be one of the most painful ways to slowly die. When I think of the level of betrayal that he spewed onto all these women, I literally want to puke. Poor Mary. Can you imagine? First off, being in a vulnerable position of needing or wanting to get a back alley abortion and then to be blindfolded and tied to a table and then bitten by a rattler. I can't even imagine the emotions she would have had upon the realization that she had been betrayed by her husband. Or realizing that she had just been bitten by a snake, a rattler, because her ears weren't plugged, she would have heard the rattle, and feeling the venom coursing through her body. At the end of the day, Robert James got exactly what he deserved, and it seems apropos that he suffered. Not nearly enough, in my opinion, but he suffered for about a good 10 minutes before his last breath. Newest fear on my long list of fears, dying by rattlesnake bite. Jesus, that would be horrible. I think I would just pee and pass out from the realization that a rattlesnake had just bitten me. And if that ever happens, I hope that I just stay unconscious until I die. And that the snake slithers away from me because I really don't want it to touch me. And then, of course, because I did this, I've been thinking about nothing but rattlesnakes. So I checked with the magic Google box, and rattlesnakes live like everywhere from Canada to Argentina. So then I screamed out loud, and I immediately Googled what rattlesnake lives in Ontario. Apparently, in Ontario, we have a rattlesnake called the Massasauga, and thank God it lives about 2 to 3 hours away from me, but I think a snake could travel 2 to 3 hours, so I'm going to have to start carrying a machete to chop off snake heads. Just putting it out there for all of you. And then, of course, I went down a deep Google dive and found out that the Massasauga rattlesnake is endangered, which means that it lives in the wild in Ontario but is facing imminent extinction, which kind of made me sad, but for only a millisecond. And with that, I think we'll leave it there for this week. Stay safe, get your pap test done, and enjoy your day today. This has been a Bitter Witness production.